Fantastic. Oh, look at that, how excited. We're like professionals. Hey, everybody. Professional what? I don't know. My name is Phil, and I'm going to tell you more about me in a minute. Claire, you've not done Crowd Church before.
I'm so excited to be
here. The first minute didn't work very well, but that's not because of us. We've got a few minutes. Imagine that the people watching this have no idea who you are, what you do, and I've just given away your names, Claire. Tell us something else.
Well, my comedy name is Claire Glay. You can see it on the screen, and that is how I introduce myself to all and sundry. My husband is slightly appalled, but basically, yeah, Claire Glay. I'm married into it, and I love it. Embrace the rhythm of life and the comedy, and so that's partly who I am. And I have, with my husband John, adopted 2 kids, 0 to 60, possibly 0 to 100 overnight. A 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
When they arrived?
When they arrived.
Okay.
Walking, talking.
Okay.
Yeah, all the rest of it. And so that was 4 years ago, so we can talk a bit more about that journey later on. But I also, in my normal life, I've started working now. I do 15 hours of work a week, which I am loving. Social prescribing.
What's that?
So that is, basically, people go to the doctors and they say, oh, I need help with my finances and my houses and I'm feeling lonely and sad. And the doctor says, I can't help you with those. I'll give you some tablets, but go and talk to this woman. And they come and talk to me. And I link them in with charities and organisations to try and help with those other things.
That sounds like a Crowd Church almost all on its own, maybe for another time. Well, if I haven't ever come across you before in real life, my name is Phil. I am an adopter too. I've got birth kids and I've been a foster carer. And if we're going to use terminology or words that you don't know, we will try and explain them as we go along.
We'll try.
Because it is an unusual world that we live in where you talk about birth children, birth parents. Sometimes the language is it can be deemed to be offensive. So in our house, we talk about, when we say the word dad, we have to explain which dad do you mean. First dad, real dad, second dad, birth dad, other father.
Yeah, Tommy mummy.
Yeah.
Or birth mum.
Yeah.
Or, and the name of the mum often as well. I nearly said it then.
Don't do that. My little rule, or our little rule in our family is we try not to take offence. We try not to offend anybody, but we try not to take offence as well. Because most people, they absolutely mean well when they're discussing your family. Yeah. It is a little bit tricky when somebody would say to our adopted son, oh, your real parents. That's a little bit offensive, but most people don't mean that. No. They're just a little bit inept. Yeah. Biology mother, tummy mummy, we have that just because it rhymes. Yeah. Anything else we need to know about you?
I've made cake, so we've had some fruit cake.
We've already
had cake. There we go. I like cake.
And your outfit to be on Crowd Church, because I obviously have come as a TV presenter from the late 70s, early 80s. I'm channeling a Blue Peter.
I deliberately didn't wear stripes.
Did you?
One of my favourite rings.
Which ring?
It does make you, but you're doing all right.
Okay,
don't worry about it.
Probably beyond that,
just get over it.
Thanks. I've drawn attention to the fact that I might look fat, and you've told me to get over it. Tune in for more.
We're so loving.
Tune in for. We've known each other 25, 30 years.
30 years.
I'm trying to think if we could possibly offend each other. We could play that game.
We could try.
It's probably going to be unlikely. So anyway, I'm actually colourblind as well. So what do you look like?
I'm dark fuchsia pink. Yeah. And then a pale pink underneath. And then, nice little kind of kimono-y thing. And then my favourite little heart ring. There you go.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm wearing a stripy shirt because, and people seem to think I'm French. And I will talk. There's another. I know we've got to go to the talk, the sermon in a minute. Yeah. But here's a great one. One of my adopted son. I'll have to differentiate between them all. Yeah. He calls me at home. He calls me Phil. Yeah. When we're out and about, he calls me Dad. Yeah. So he doesn't want people to draw. He doesn't draw attention to the fact that we're not DNA related. Yeah. We went on holiday to France, and we've been a few times, and he found out that in France, Phils are not called Phil, they're called Philippes. So when we went on holiday to France, he started to call me Philippe. And then when we came back and we had croissants, because we're like dead middle class, and pain au chocolat, he went, this is like France. So he started to call me Philippe again, but only if we're having something that he associates with the continent.
Well, and in Germany, fathers are also called farters, which in our house is appropriate.
Yeah, you suddenly suggested that your husband, and
he's not here, and he'll never see it.
Do you know the German for fat? No, we've gone too far, because I'm a German teacher as well.
Yeah, I know that.
You used to be a counsellor as well.
I did. A city counsellor for Liverpool, which was wonderful, and probably was quite similar to the job that I'm doing now in terms of bringing people together with organisations that can help and support them. So a similar kind of thing.
All round good egg. So if you've got a comment to make, chuck it in the comments.
Yeah.
We're not the technical people.
No,
so
we've got somebody with us.
Yeah, Matt is over there and he does all the technical stuff. If you've got if you've got questions to ask, go for it. What we're going to do is we've got another mutual friend of ours called Adam. Again, we've known him a long time. Brilliant guy. And I think we're going to go to Adam's talk, which I've always wanted to say this. Roll VT, which I think used to stand for videotape. Back in the 80s. Can you see our age? My age, anyway. I'm older.
No, only about a year.
Yeah. Anyway, roll VT. Let's have Adam and Adam's talk. It's going to be brilliant.
It is.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
What does the Bible say about adoption? Hi, my name is Adam, and it's my privilege to speak to you today about what the Bible says about adoption. As well as being a Christian, I'm also an adoptive parent, having adopted 3.5-year-old twins over 22 years ago, and now with my wife, we spend time supporting other families who have embarked on the amazing but often challenging adventure of adopting children into their family, sharing our experiences where they may be of benefit to others. Our own adoption story, as for many adopters, started with not being able to conceive naturally. Some singles or couples may choose to build a family through adoption rather than pursuing other avenues. Some who adopt welcome children into their own unique situation of maybe already having birth children or stepchildren, or maybe having other children living with them who are not related to them, such as those in foster care. Wherever the starting point, Christians who adopt are first and foremost responding to God's heart for children who are not in a family. Almost right from the start of the scriptures, we see the principle of adoption in play. In the second book of the Bible, in Exodus chapter 2, we read the story of Moses. He was born to a family of the tribe of Levi at a time when Pharaoh the king had given the order to kill every newborn baby boy. However, God's hand was on Moses' life, and when he was 3 months old, his birth parents hid him in a basket in the reeds. Pharaoh's daughter came to the river to bathe, found the basket with baby Moses in it, felt sorry for him, and took him in under her wing and protection. Even more amazing, Pharaoh's daughter called for Moses' mother to nurse him and even paid her for doing it. When Moses was older, we don't actually know how old he was, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him into her family, and he went on to play a very significant role in God's story. If Pharaoh had had his way, then Moses wouldn't have been alive. But Moses was adopted into the king's family, and in the same way that we, as Christians, are adopted into King Jesus' family when we commit our lives to him. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5, it says that God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. We're God's children, part of God's family, adopted by the Heavenly Father into his eternal family through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Not only that, but this gives him great pleasure, which is amazing. In Romans chapter 8, verse 15, the word says that we receive God's Holy Spirit when he adopted us as his own children, and we can call him Father. This is an incredible promise to those who follow Christ, and is a wonderful illustration of the power of the Holy Spirit in transforming our lives when we follow him, in the same way that as adopted parents, we have the opportunity to transform the lives of children who become part of our family. The Old Testament is full of references to encouraging the people of God to pay special attention to the orphan or those children who were not part of a family for whatever reason. For example, in Isaiah chapter 1, one of the visions that Isaiah the prophet had for the people of Israel was very specifically to defend the cause of the orphans. In Psalm 146 it says that he, that is God, cares for the widows and orphans, and in Psalm 68 we hear that God is father to the fatherless and that he places the lonely in families. These Old Testament references show us clearly that in those days, God's heart and plan was for children that no longer had parents for whatever reason, and they were able to be part of a family and be raised by that family as though the child was born to them naturally. In many societies and cultures today, this is how orphans are expected to be cared for, usually by a close relative. So how has adoption changed through history, and how might it continue to change in future? In our own society here in the UK, we have seen many changes in policies and approaches over the centuries. For example, in the 1800s, many orphans were sent to orphanages, which were often cruel and dark places. In more recent history, one of the biggest changes, particularly in the UK, is the change resulting from the introduction of contraception and termination of pregnancy. For example, in the 1960s, many adoptions were relinquished babies, where single mothers were encouraged to give up their babies in order for their children to have, quote, a better life, and to grow up without the stigma of being an unmarried mother. These days, this is rarely the case, and the majority of children in the care system have experienced significant additional trauma, such as abuse or neglect, above and beyond the trauma caused by separation from their birth mother. In the present day, many systems of adoption are based primarily on the needs of the child, ensuring where possible that everything is done to ensure the best outcome for the child. In future, the focus is likely to be on prevention through proactive support to individuals and families before the breakdown of the family, which could potentially lead to an adoption situation. The work of organisations such as Safe Families is paramount to supporting families in difficult circumstances. Adoptive families now come in all shapes and sizes, but at the heart of this, at least from a Christian adoption perspective, is to welcome a little child on that's God's behalf, and echoing the words of Jesus in Matthew 18, verse 5, when he was talking about how we can be welcomed into the kingdom of God. The process to become an adoptive parent, at least in England, takes many hours of form filling, probing interviews, assessments, training, and lots of waiting. But to be adopted into God's family requires a simple decision to follow Jesus, a willingness to submit our lives to him as Lord, and a desire to allow the Holy Spirit to mould, shape, and teach us. So what are some of the benefits of adoption? I asked some of the adopted parents in the Liverpool Home for Good group, which provides support primarily to Christian adopters, for their views. These are some of the things that came back. Firstly, the children became our sons or daughters, take on the family name, and become heirs to our estate, which has many parallels with how God sees us when we are adopted into his family. Secondly, you can make an unbelievable difference to the life of one or more children and can change their future destiny. Thirdly, you can provide a place of safety and nurture. Fourthly, you learn a lot about yourself and you grow so much as a person, in particularly how to deal with people who are very different to you. For me personally, this has been the most significant one, and adopting has helped shape me a person more than anything else. Fifthly, being able to be a family and hearing little people call you mum and dad is an amazing experience. And sixthly, even when they're angry at you, it's a privilege to know that they feel safe enough with you to let you know their pain. And lastly, being able to give a child the security of a forever family rather than the insecurity of the care system. However, what about some of the challenges associated with adoption? I think we all know that not every adoption is like the glorified Hollywood blockbuster movie with the cutesy children and the happy ending. In our own adoption story, we were incredibly naive about how much and how quickly God would intervene and bring about change in the children that became part of our family. Again, here are some of the things that came back from the Home for Good group members about the challenges. First of all, you will be tested. There can be aggression, violence, destruction, and allegations. It's not an easy path to take, and I can certainly attest to that personally. Secondly, parenting children who have gone through trauma, and they all have, is really hard work physically and emotionally. Thirdly, some friends and family don't really understand the challenges, and you can end up losing relationships. People often mean well with their comments and offers of help, but that doesn't always mean it is what is best for the child. Many children have additional needs, and you may need to adjust your expectations and dreams for your child or children. Simply things that you may take for granted with a birth child, like enjoying a holiday, may be difficult or impossible for adopted children. When my adopted children were younger, I would often find it so comforting to talk to another adoptive dad, for example, to celebrate the success of something that would seem really insignificant to many others of my peers in work or church, such as making significant steps in learning to read, when many of those other families were already planning their university education for their child. And finally, you can end up spending a lot of time fighting for the resources or the therapy or the diagnosis or the funding that your child needs. It's like having another job. This is tiring, but is also a testament to the commitment adoptive families put into their children to fight for what they need. So how as Christians can we support adoptive families? Well, one thing we can all do is pray. Pray for God to uphold those Christian parents who have welcomed a child from a different birth family into their home. Pray for peace and wisdom in those difficult and challenging moments, and for an outpouring of love and grace towards children who are often hurting, to help them know that they belong in an earthly family, but are also part of God's family. Secondly, we can ask God how we can best help those around us, and also ask those families that were adopted or in the process of adopting what they most need. It may not be babysitting the child so they can go and have some time and space, but it may well be simple things such as cooking the family a meal so they don't have to, or going and doing some housework or the garden while they're out, and lots of other simple things that many of us can do that gives the adoptive family more time to focus on settling and supporting the child into the adoptive family environment. And thirdly, help the child feel welcome and part of the family. This will involve some wisdom and guidance from the parent or parents as to how best to do this based on the child's own particular needs. But helping a child feel part of and connected to something bigger of which they belong can make a massive difference to that child. So what about the bigger question then? What is our response to children in need of homes? What is the Christian response to that need given in the scriptures that we looked at previously? Well, we all have a call on our lives from God, and God is happy to share those plans with us, as outlined in Jeremiah 33, verse 3. But that call is not the same for everyone, and that's okay. For many, praying for and practically providing support to an adoptive family is all that God is calling you to do. But for others, like my wife and I, through prayerful consideration, talking and praying with others around us, and submission of our plans for our lives to God, for Him to guide and shape, then maybe God is calling you to do more and consider adopting a child or children into your family. First of all, ask God what His plans for you are. You may not get an audible voice or clear and immediate sense that you should start the application process straight away, but you may feel a sense of peace about your request to God and a desire to know more. If so, I would encourage you to do two things. Firstly, share your interest in adoption with others and ask them to pray with you as you explore adoption further. Secondly, find out more. Maybe express an interest in adoption with your local council and potentially also with private adoption agencies. Speak with adoptive families to find out their experience, not only of the process of adoption, but also what it is like to be an adopter, the good, the bad, and the really ugly. And maybe do some research, looking at organisations such as Home for Good that I mentioned previously, who support Christian adoption and fostering. As you go through the process, hold your plans lightly. Keep seeking God through prayer, the Bible, and through talking to others, and focus on doing His will. I hope this talk on what the Bible says about adoption encourages and inspires you to ask God to find out what your part in this incredible calling and ministry is, from the seemingly smallest contribution of simply praying all the way through to the transforming the life of a child that you welcome into your family with an open heart and open arms. God bless you and thank you for listening.
Me, because they're like proper scientists. Oh, I've got bad hair. They're like proper, sorry, Matt Crew. They're like proper scientific approach to things. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
We were talking so much inspired by that. But I've got to say that we're now going to go into a time of worship, and John and Anna Grace are going to lead us with a song called How Deep Is the Father's Love, which seems very, very apt. We'll be back to do Conversation Street after this song. Thanks very much.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: His wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: His wounds have paid my ransom.
I think it's great. Very often God is referred to as a father, which certainly for me, my experience, my own dad's brilliant. He's still ticking along. Queen's Park Rangers fan, but other than that, he's a great guy.
Bless him.
And so when I became a Christian when I was nearly 19, the idea that God was a father figure, that was okay for me. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. So you've got a birth father or an earthly father. God's a father in heaven. He's a little bit different, but I understand that imagery. If you've got any comments, chuck them in the comment section. But
we'll try and answer.
You'll find me and Claire will chat forever. Are you okay to talk back into the history of your decisions a little bit and why you got into adoption, or even back further?
Yeah, and actually, just as you were saying that, for me, my father experience, he was completely absent growing up from birth. And I see him now as an adult, but that was a long process that involved forgiveness. I knew who he was, I knew where he lived even, but there had been no contact at all. And I often think now, for my own children's experiences, they have had no contact with their birth fathers.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know, so I'm able to, and I actually have shared that recently with my eldest, and she was like, oh yeah, I understand. She's 9 now, so she's starting to understand a little bit more about life and relationships and how all of that happens. But for us, me and my husband, we got married later in life. We wanted children. I had a miscarriage early on in our marriage. Sadly, very commonly. I know that people have talked about that previously on Crowd Church, and I think that I was actually a city councillor, and I was in a meeting. I was in Education Select Committee one night, and we had a presentation by the adoption team, I think, or the looked after children team in the city council, and they said something like 1,500 children needing adoption, fostering. And I texted my husband in the meeting, probably shouldn't have done that, and I said, "Love, shall we adopt?" And he was like, before the meeting had ended, he was like, "Yeah, go on then." And so that was great. That was the start of our journey. We knew people like Adam and Joe, Phil and Helena, who'd already gone ahead of us. So I think we talked to you guys actually about a little bit more about the process. We went along to the council and talked to them about how it would work. And the process, like Adam said, it was quite formal, but it was quite quick, 6 months. Some social worker asking us very detailed questions about, what are your parenting plans, or how do you feel about hitting your children and things like that. But the answer is we don't. So that was all quite easy. But then that process for us of waiting for our children to come home or to come and live with us was about 2.5 years, and for me was...
So hang on, so you got, I'm going to use a technical term, you got approved to adopt.
We did.
And that is,
Big tick.
It's a long process. Well, it's 6 months, and then a group of people who don't know you.
Read all your paperwork.
They read all your paperwork, and then you have to go to something called a panel, which is about 8-9 people that sit around a room, and the thing they tell you is, and I've been on a panel, don't be worried, don't be afraid.
They all like you.
As 8 people are staring at you, and then they ask you questions about yourself, they've read all about you, they know your history, then they say, we think you're approved to adopt. And then there's a waiting process. How does that actually work?
Well, I, without being too negative, forgive me if I am, I used to call it the database of doom. And basically, it's a website of children who need to be adopted. And I had to steel myself. It was me. John didn't do it. Right. I had to steel myself to look through this, a bit like internet dating in a kind of weird, nasty way. And not that there's anything wrong with internet dating.
You're thinking a hole. Keep going. It's all right.
And so basically,
I think it's like looking for a second-hand car. That's nearly as bad. All right,
anyway, so yes, so we did that, and actually we didn't find any. We found kids, but they weren't suitable. Who knows why? Never really could understand how it all worked. But eventually, we were matched with these 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and they were 5 and 2.
Are they full siblings, full? Their brother and sister, or is that not appropriate?
That's probably their story, really.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, good.
So, and actually, they wouldn't fully know that story.
Okay.
Certainly the youngest one yet. And so, but yeah, so they are brother and sister.
Yeah.
And they came to live with us 4 years ago, and it has been a roller coaster. So, and I think Adam's right in what he said, that thing about you being changed and challenged, your relationship with your partner is massively tested. You think you've talked about these things ad nauseum. Well, I like that word. It's a bit Latin. Throw that into the equation.
Erudite we are.
You still have to have those conversations about, no, we need to have a limit on the iPad a bit.
Yeah. I can say this because I'm a birth parent as well. It's like birth parenting. There is such a thing, but also it isn't. So our story is a little bit different from yours. If it's okay to interject, which is so me and my wife, we got married. We had 2 birth kids, just like lots of other people. And we look like the most. We live in a semi-detached house with pebble dash. We've
trees
got
outside,
We've got one of those plastic things that you put compost in. Do you know what I mean?
We've got one of those.
Well,
but we live in a terrace.
Okay, what I'm saying, I suppose I'm trying to give you this image of very normal respectability.
Yeah.
My wife was a solicitor for the council,
Yeah.
and I'm a teacher some of the time. And one day my wife said, "Shall we foster?" Now, people often confuse fostering and adoption, and they look similar, but they're actually not. So what we did was we decided to foster. And foster is when you look after a child that hasn't got a safe place to go to. So we're something called mainstream foster carers. I'm going to be very generalised here, but when a child can't live with their birth mum and dad, and it could be for something to do with mental health reasons, there could be alcohol or drugs, there could be violence, there could be somebody in prison, could just be illness. You get ill and you don't have an extended family for a child to go to. And the first thing that the social workers will do on behalf of all of us, because they represent us, is they'll try and find an auntie or a cousin or a nan or somebody, and that's sometimes called
kinship.
It's called kinship. It used to be called kinship.
Yeah.
Now we tend to call it family and friends or connected carers.
Yeah.
Different terminology, different names. I hope that all makes sense. So John Lennon, there's a good example, local lad, John Lennon from Liverpool. Yeah. His mum and dad couldn't look after him, mental health issues, drug and alcohol problems. So Auntie Mimi, his mum's sister, I think, said, "I'll take him in." And basically John Lennon went to live with Auntie Mimi. Nowadays we would call that family and friends foster care or kinship care. If there is no Auntie Mimi, you go into mainstream foster care. And the number of children in mainstream care in England is about 83,000. So if you imagine a Wembley football stadium, they'd fill it. It's a lot of children. And those children go into foster care and they are looked after by foster carers. Yeah. And that can be people like our family. So in our situation, it was me and my wife, 2 birth kids. And we took in extra children.
And your kids had to be okay with that.
Yeah. So
they were included
exactly
in your approval, really.
This is so weird. Our birth kids. We've got a few questions coming in. You read that. I'll keep chatting. You read them can you multitask?
I'm trying.
Anyway, so
I am reading.
Oh God, well done. Our birth kids were 5 and 7 when we started to foster, which was relatively young. But so they've grown up thinking. I don't think they think it's normal. They just think it's what we do. John Lennon did not perform at Glastonbury. Unofficially, he performed. I suppose he was in a video with Macca. But anyway, so we started to foster. So there's a lot of children in care in Liverpool, but also across the country and across the globe. And we went through not a dissimilar process where we found out about fostering. We went to our council. They ran drop-in events, information evenings. Yeah. And wherever you are, your council I would recommend as the first port of call. Just Google where you live and fostering. So Liverpool
they advertise
fostering.
It on buses and everything.
You will find a picture of me because I work for fostering services in Liverpool. What do you know? And then you will find out a little bit more about it, and then you can apply. And a social worker will come round to your house probably and fill in. They call it a form, but it isn't. It's more like a book. It's like 100 pages long on who are you, why do you want to do this. You have to do police checks, medical checks. Do you have to do training?
Yeah.
You say, yeah. Well, there's quite a lot of
the
training.
Police checks.
Oh,
they went on and on.
They've sped up now because they realise you can do it on the internet, which is quicker than posting. But anyway,
I think it got stuck on somebody's desk in our life.
It can seem like a long process.
Yeah.
Then we got, like adoption, we get approved to foster.
Yeah.
And then you're waiting for phone calls. Yeah. And you get a phone call from a social worker saying, "Hi, could you look after a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old?" And you can give a vague idea of what age you'd like to foster. And you could say, we think because we've got more experience with boys or girls. But, we're a very, I don't want to say traditional because I don't think that works anymore. We're a mum, dad, 2 birth kids. But you can be single, you can be, there's no top age, you can, as long as you're over 21. Yeah. For fostering, it's find out from your council whether if you're interested. And since we've been, when did we get approved? That's what it's called. We're approved to foster. I think we have had a massive total of 7. So not many foster kids. And people always go, "Why isn't it hundreds?" And you go, "Because we kept one." Yeah.
And your journey. There will be people in Liverpool who've I think I've read about somebody who's
100, 200.
50.
Easy.
But everybody's journey is different,
absolutely.
isn't it? And there was a question that came up earlier about whether we thought that we were always going to adopt or foster.
Go on.
I would say I never thought about fostering or adopting particularly growing up. It wasn't really a concept. I think coming to church and being exposed to people like Adam and Joe and yourselves, I think then it became a part of a process in my thinking that, oh, this is actually an option for me. It's not a stigma. There's not that same stigma as there used to be attached in life. Jack, I think it was in the comments, your story that you discovered, when you were 8. I think that's changed. Certainly our kids know that they're adopted. And actually, I wanted to say this little story. Today in church, they were doing a little thing about listening to God and like praying. And Olivia had to ask God or tell God something that was wow about her. Oh, sorry, I've just told her name. Forgive me, nobody knows. And so basically she said, the thing about me that's wow to God is that I am adopted. And I was just like, hooray! It's a positive thing for you. It is that, and that's today, and tomorrow it might be something else, but that's the reality, isn't it? And I was thrilled about that today.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story.
Dave wanted to know something
about our children. So it's the best. So I talk about fostering a lot in my job because I find foster carers, I promote fostering, and I'm often asked, what about birth kids? And obviously you need to ask them, and they will give you a blunt truth. But generally speaking, I'm really proud of our birth kids, and we don't go birth kid, adopted kid. They're just the kids. But I know that it's a value in our family. I would say a value is you make your house welcome and opening to other people, and it's really interesting about one of the verses. I could talk about so much that Adam mentioned was. God puts the lonely in families, and I think that's like whether they're a refugee, or whether they're a baby, whether they're a teenager, or whether they're 101 years of age. No one is meant to live a life of loneliness, and it's making your home. It's extending your table, isn't it? To use that analogy of our kitchen, our table. There's always room for more people. Let's bring them in. Let's welcome everybody. The Yiddish word is mishpocha. It's one of my favourite, and it just means your family, your friends. Anybody who can walk into your house, go into your fridge, put the kettle on and go, I'll make the tea. It's a wonderful phrase. So I would say that our birth kids have become better people because we have lived with this hospitality in our family. One day they might turn around and go, actually, this wasn't so good, or this wasn't that good. I'll go, well, it's how we chose to live, and I guess all families choose to live in a certain way. And
your boy, Jamie, he has really blessed our kids. They think he's fab. And I think because there's some understanding of how children impacted by trauma and different, they call it adverse childhood experiences. Respond and react in certain situations and just need that little extra bit of TLC.
I would say both birth kids have got a sense of they understand that not everybody has had the blessings and privilege that they have, and I think that's a really important thing to have in life, to go, there are other people, I've got this good thing, I'm gonna share it. For one of our particular foster kids, a very long story, and I'll abridge it slightly, is one day we'd had this lovely kid. He'd lived with us for a few years, and I've told this story possibly on Crowd Church before, but one day he's been very, very quiet, and he, and if you've got children and a quiet child, you go, oh, they'll be fine, probably. But then I started to think, I better go and see what he's doing. And he was in our lounge, the front lounge, often known as the posh lounge. Don't know if you've got one of them.
No.
And he'd taken a family photo off the wall, and he pulled off the frame, and he'd broken the glass, and he'd got a pen, and he'd added himself. So there's a little drawing of him. There's a lovely little picture, and I went, oh, that's very interesting, because you do learn when you foster not to be surprised and not to be shocked. And
sometimes it's hard.
And I was like, oh, why do you think you've done that? And it's a very hard thing. I think it was about 8. It's a very hard, maybe a bit younger, 7. Very hard thing to say. I love you. I want to be here. It's making yourself very vulnerable. It's hard when you're an adult. But we sort of said, do you think you want to be in our family? Do you want to join our family forever? And for him, because there is no other birth family, no other relatives, there's no way of him, there's no other family that he could go back to, we adopted him. Now that isn't the best thing for every child who's in foster care. Sometimes they're called children in care. Sometimes they're called looked after children, which I don't really like because it spells looked after child, spells lack, and I don't like the word. But sometimes children go back to their birth family. Sometimes they get adopted. Sometimes they live in foster care for long periods of time. So we had one brilliant lad, and I can use his more details. We were told by social workers, and if this sounds
we
exciting,
love social workers.
we love them. Yeah,
come on.
If this sounds this is one it might convince somebody. If you're thinking about fostering, find out more. So we got a phone call one day from a social worker. I think it was a Monday. Can you take a 10-year-old? He's a boy and he's Russian, and we were like, when? And they went, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And this lad,
Google Translate.
Well, this lad had gone into school in the morning. So think about this, everybody, if you're watching.
Yeah.
This is a very emotional
Yeah.
thing, but this is the reality. He'd gone into school.
Yeah.
He carried on school, all was normal. His mum had got very seriously ill, she'd been taken into hospital, and the medical staff had rung up social services saying, we've got this lady, she's in hospital, there's no way she's going home for the foreseeable future. We know she has a child in your school system.
Yeah.
And so the social workers are going, right, they find out the name of the child, they find out the school where he's at, because they've got a database, they ring up the school. Is this boy in school today? Yes, he is. Great. Right, we know he's safe at school. They then go through their list of approved foster carers, and they came to us and they said, look, we know he's 10, we're pretty sure he's 10, we know he's a boy, and he's Russian. Can we bring him round in 2 hours' time? Now, for some people, that would be terrifying, impossible, logistics, but as a foster carer, or foster carers, we went, yeah, but hang on a minute, we also know that they wouldn't be ringing us if he didn't have if he had somewhere else to go. Yeah. So we went, right, we'll say yes, and this is a bit of an insight into the character of foster carers. There's a need, we'll try and meet it. Lots of other issues, lots of problems. What about tomorrow? What about, what is it like eating and drinking? What about, don't know any of those things, but we'll find a solution.
Yeah.
This lad, so think of a 10-year-old in your head, he's leaving school, he's done numeracy, literacy, he's done colouring in and golden time, played footy in the yard, and he's about to leave school. Head teacher has to grab him on the way out, takes him into the office. Social worker's there, he's looking at a social worker, he's looking at the head teacher, he's terrified.
Yeah.
Social worker, he doesn't know what one is, it's just a lady, and this lady has to say to him, you can't go home, your mummy's ill, we don't know how ill, we don't know when you can see her, I'm going to take you in my car, we're going to drive to another bit of the city, and I'm going to put you into the house of some people who are called Phil and Helena. Yeah. If somebody says that to your child, you would tell your child, don't go with a stranger. Yeah. So the head teacher has to convince this lovely young lad it's safe to go, but you can't promise anything. You can't go, I'm sure it'll be all right, because you don't know. You can't say, I'll see you tomorrow, because you don't know. This social worker puts this lad into her car. He's wearing the same clothes he left his home with him. He's got nothing with him for an overnight stay or longer. She drives him across Liverpool. She's never met us before either. Now, we've been told he was Russian, so I did go on YouTube how to say hello in Russian. And we decided when he arrived. No, that's not. That's a different way. It's more complicated. There's an easier way. Don't listen.
We speak all languages.
Don't listen to her Russian.
Church.
Her Russian's rubbish. Listen to mine. Anyway,
mine's Kyrgyz Russian.
Well, that's the difference. Exactly. It's from. Anyway, this lad arrives, and we decided. My wife decided. You do the social worker. Yeah. I'll chat to the lad because he's a boy and I'm a boy. It's the best we can come up with. Yeah. So anyway, this lad arrives, and I went. Privyet, which is another way of saying hello, and I'm not joking. And I was really proud because I'd gone on YouTube to find this out. And he stared at me and he went, "Oh," and I went, and then, "What? Why are you speaking Russian? I'm not Russian." And I went, "Aren't you?" And he went, "No." And then he did have an Eastern European tang and a twang, and I can sense it. "I'm not Russian. I'm from Moldova." Now. We know a bit more about this now because we don't want to get into the other political situation here, but can you imagine if you told somebody from Ukraine they were Russian or Russian Ukraine? He's like, I'm not Russian. It's like Russia is 1,000 miles away from Moldova. Yeah. So I went to him, you're not Russian. You're from Moldova. Well, where is Moldova? Because I'd heard of it, but I didn't know where it was.
Well,
and he went,
probably never been there
either. Well, he was like going, he came in and he went, I can tell you where it is. Let's get Google Maps out. So we basically spent the first hour or so on Google Maps finding out where he was from. Yeah. And then we played FIFA online, which I'm sure you're familiar with the football game.
Never.
He was Moldova, and me and my son, Jamie, were the rest of the world in a FIFA game, and he managed to beat us.
Yeah.
Now, this is just a little anecdote of
Yeah.
what can happen if you foster. That lad stayed with us. He was able to go back to his same school because it was safe there, so he was able to keep that connection. And he lived with us for 6 months. He stayed in foster care for, I think, maybe 2 years in all. And eventually we heard on the grapevine he'd gone back to Moldova.
Wow.
And then, about a year ago, I was on Instagram chatting about football.
Get you?
Yeah, and suddenly, out of nowhere, I got a message saying, it's going to make me cry. Are you Phil? And I went, yes, I am. And he went, did I live with you? Yeah. And it was his foster kid.
Oh, no.
And he found us.
Yeah.
He tracked us down. And now he's at university, lives with his mum.
Yeah.
He lives back with his dog. He was always
Yeah.
worried about his dog.
Yeah.
And he didn't need to go into adoption. He just needed somewhere to stay
Safe space.
while his mum was ill
Yeah.
and he didn't have any other family in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So it's in every single child in care, there's a story like that.
Yeah.
And for us, we are motivated to foster. We were motivated to adopt by our faith, because as Adam went through so many verses there. But also, it's our faith, but it's also a sort of just a general altruism, just a general social, come on, we can make a difference. And it's, like you say, I mean, you'll have had some tricky times with, all parents will say they've had tricky times with kids. If you've been through a degree of significant amount of trauma, you do function and approach life, I think, in a different way, and which is why I sort of started off by saying it's difficult. We have to be careful when we chuck out God is like a father, because for some people, well, that's not good.
No.
My father left me. My father hurt me. My
Beat
father,
me.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful how we couch that language. But go on.
Well, I was just thinking about that sense of belonging, isn't it? It's so key to our children and like who they are and their identity, and programs now like Long Lost Family and all of that, and the amazing technology that can connect people who previously, like we were talking about before, weren't we, about Philomena, the film, and these people who were completely separated from birth, who didn't know their birth family, whereas my children do have that information, that luxury, but they still haven't met them, and so to become part of a new family, it takes time, and and our children have been with us for 4 years now, but it's still it feels like a 4-year-old, even though they're physically older, there are still things that they are learning about me and my husband that, well, it's just different, and it rewrites that past and that traumatic past of the separation from birth family, then the separation from foster family where they were well looked after and well loved, but we're able to keep in touch with foster family, which helps to keep that sense of identity and love and acceptance and all those really important things. So I think I think if I think too much about my children's story, I'd just get like overwhelmed. And so to live with it day to day, you just have to get on with it from 9 times out of 10. But every now and again you have little glimpses into it, and it's mainly my elder child because she's older and she remembers more, and that's actually a really interesting thing. Actually, they've had the same experience, but they haven't had the same experience because one can remember it and one can't, and so you're dealing, I guess, like all families, birth children are different, even when they're all unique, aren't they? Each child is unique, and so you have to tailor your approach to each one.
And it's interesting as well, because I certainly, I'm a teacher and I've done some youth work before we decided to have our own children, before we decided to foster. And in culture, there are looked after children or orphans all the time. So Harry Potter's possibly the most famous orphan in history. Little Orphan Annie is another famous orphan. The clue is in the name. And I've got to say, I actually hate that film now. I didn't mind it when I didn't know about it. Little Orphan Annie just drives me mad, because somehow there's this idea that there's a load of children smiling and grinning who will be very grateful and thankful for some random family picking them up, and I always find it I find it twee. It annoys me.
Anna Green Gables is a better one.
Yeah,
and you might not have read that as a bloke. It's a bit girly, but
it's very gender something. But you're absolutely right, I haven't. But I have watched all of the Star Wars is with Luke and Leia.
But that also,
exactly.
very powerful siblings
very,
separated at
exactly.
birth.
And that if you want to look at a difficult relationship with a father, Luke Skywalker is a very good place to start. But you get this in cartoons, you get this in all sorts of Disney productions, and it's an interesting thing because there's something about, I really believe there's something about human beings where your heart goes out to orphans or sometimes it's a plot device. Let's just remove the children from a story. But even if you think about something like The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, a bunch of kids go and live in the countryside in a house separated from family. Then they go through a wardrobe and there's no adults involved. And whilst it is quite exciting to go, let's just remove the adults. Also, I think there's something in the heart of human beings that roots and shouts for the child that doesn't have a family, that has a very bad or should we say a disadvantaged start in life. And
it's a good job, eh?
Yeah, it's a good job. It's a good job because otherwise,
we're even more children.
But it is. I mean, I don't know about you. Must do it in our world. We call these things triggers or triggering, and we go, we got to be careful of that film or that show because it might make our little man. I say little man. He's 15 and he's massive.
He's not little anymore.
He's bigger than me. And sometimes if we go to the cinema, like James Bond is another orphan.
He is,
I can't remember exactly the backstory, but he grows up.
That house in Skyfall.
Yeah, exactly. And it just happens again and again. And even if you live in our world, you think about it a lot more, and you go, we've just gone into a film and we're watching something, and are you okay with this?
Yeah.
How does it matter?
But I find myself realising that I've got loads of triggers now personally. Just like with behaviour and stuff like that, I'll think, oh no, that's triggering me now. So it's hard.
Someone's just put in Lion is another one. Yeah, Lion is it's a beautiful story, but
that is a good story.
And it's funny because there is a degree of pain there in all these stories, and I'm sort of being a bit flippant about some of them, but bizarrely, I don't like looking for the pain, but I like the fact that there's a response to it. And the thing about some of these stories is they're just sad. Whereas I find, fostering and because we've adopted somebody, there's thousands of kids. We can't save them all. It's like there's a great story about a little boy saving starfish that have been washed up on the beach. And somebody says, you'll never save them all. And the little boy goes, yeah, but I'll be able to save this one. Yeah. And kind of that's how I look at it, or we look at it, is this little kid. I mean, I'm not his saviour. I'm just his dad, or whatever he chooses to call me that day. But he's had a difficult time, but his future is positive. And sometimes I watch, is there one called Who Do You Think You Are? Where you family tree. And I'm thinking, because I've got a massive ego, wouldn't it be great if one day one of my children's children was on that, and then they find out, and then there was two people called Phil and Eleanor, and they adopted this kid. And people would go, and they'd all be crying, it'd be all because of me.
Well,
in a good way.
And we share our whatever inheritance we give our kids. They'll be in our wills. They'll inherit whatever we have. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
It is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because when you adopt or when you foster, you are engaging with everybody. And a beautiful story. Is that 5 seconds or 5 minutes, Matt?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes. Keep going. Look at that. Sue. God being father is part of the reason. Okay, we'll talk about that. Read that one. I'll just tell this little story because when we adopted, I did ring my family and say, look, we're gonna this one we're keeping. And it sounds really odd. And my dad said, I've changed my will. And I'm thinking, oh wow, you've already taken on. You've got another grandson. And that was very neat. That was very important to us. And our extended family, my wife's family too, all being part of this process and all included and all being part of the adoption. Are you okay? So Sue's got me. Thanks for those comments, Sue. There.
I'm not sure.
There's a lot there going on.
There is, but we love you, Sue. We remember you with so much love.
And it is. I know. There's lots going on there. There is a depth here, and I think very often a church. I don't think people in churches mean to hurt. Probably sometimes they might do.
No.
Hope not, but. It's a very emotive issue, and sometimes people can be, because we were talking earlier about what wording to use, what phrasing to use. And like in a church like ours, where I would say there's quite a lot of kids and adults who didn't live with their birth family, we're very careful to say, right, your mum, your dad, or whoever looks after you. And sometimes people can use language, they don't mean to, but it can exclude and people can use the term father very glibly or family very glibly, and people can feel excluded. In my understanding, that is definitely not God's plan, but it's how humans.
Yeah.
The world is broken, which is why some kids can't live with their mum and dad, and they come and live with people with whom they share no DNA.
We make mistakes, don't we? And we need God's forgiveness to help us repair that.
And you know, I'm from a very, very solid background in as much as my mum and dad been married a bazillion years. They moved into a house in 1975 and they still live in it. So when I go to my mum and dad's, I sleep in the same bedroom I slept in when I was in year 1.
It's quite unusual, isn't it?
They have changed the wallpaper, but other than
not orange flowers anymore.
Exactly. But other than that, it hasn't changed. But you know, and I say I'm from a great background, but still, and I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
He did, along with
loads of other stuff that's a bit more erudite. But he said something along the lines of, and I'm going to misquote him, and I know he's not the Bible, but he said, "If I don't feel at home in this world, maybe it's because I was actually intended for another one." And I can't help thinking, so I'm from a very, very secure background, but sometimes I go, why do I feel at unease? Why do I feel not at one on planet Earth? And in my belief system, one day I will die and I will go to heaven and I will meet God, who is a perfect Father. There is not a perfect word in our language to describe him, and there I will feel fully at home. And the Bible is loads of theology here, loads of biblical stuff about God wants us to be in his family. And because it's made up of humans, it's not perfect. I like you, but I bet if we hung around for longer,
there'd be lots of things.
I would annoy you, even though you're really patient. And you, but God's plan is for everybody. Yeah. God's plan is for everybody to be included, everybody to feel part of this family, whoever.
And I think the joy. I think you're enriching your life by having more people in it. So I can think of 2 particularly single women who attend our church and who love my kids. Yeah. And who come round for tea and they buy them gifts and they sweets that I have to smuggle away because it's not not the right time. And that just really they're part of our family, our wider family as well. Which I love. And my kids love them.
Well, I wonder whether that's one of the mistakes that we've made as a society, going family is the people with whom you share a blood link, and it's like, I don't think it was ever really meant to be that way. And there is a sort of sense of community, the sense of village. Say my favourite Yiddish word, mishpocha, wawe.
It's a new word.
Wawe is Maori, and it just means you're kind of like your tribe, but you don't have to share DNA. And those verses that Adam shared about, he wants to be a father to the fatherless. We should look after the orphan and the widow, which is the most marginalised people in society. But he puts the lowly in families. Well, our family is one of those people, one of those families. Your family can be, and yours is too. And certainly our little man, he sees our church community as a safe space where he is welcome, where he is loved, where he has the same rights as anybody else. He goes to the fridge and he takes out whatever, and he takes it out and he eats it. Quite often he fries it as well. Nice. He's big at frying. He likes to fry between 2 and 4 in the morning. And today he shared me his new recipe. You put the beans in
the frying pan.
You put the beans in the jar. The jar, he means a kind of glass bowl. Then you put the cheese in. Then you put a load of butter. Then you microwave it 2 minutes. Then you put it in the oven. Then you put the toast in the toaster. Then you put it all in. Then you mix it all up. Then you eat most of it, and then you leave the plate on your bedroom floor for weeks and weeks.
For somebody to step in.
Or for somebody else to take. Yeah.
With extra mould.
And that recipe comes free from the Super K. And it is, if you want to know more about fostering, please get in touch with your council, or you can ask Crowd Church. Adoption, you can ask Crowd Church, find out about it.
We'd love to talk to you.
It's an enriching thing, and you'll never be bored.
Oh no.
If you're bored, I will give you your money back.
Did we pay?
No, we don't.
I often say buy one, get one free about my 2. I often say, buy one, get one free.
Yeah, and you two could find yourselves laughing constantly
about 2 kids that you've no idea how to parent.
Yeah. it's very exciting.
Yeah.
And I say, a long time ago, I used to be a salesman for graphic arts filing. There's nothing wrong with selling graphic arts filing.
I've got a filing cabinet turned into a garden now.
Okay, well that would have been me, and it was okay. It's a good job. It was a very good job, and it's important to do any job you do well.
Yeah.
But my life is more exciting.
I'm so glad you stopped being a filing cabinet man. It was just always like, what?
That was all right.
What?
We got off point.
We might have done.
It must be.
But I'm going to bring it back
Go
because
on.
I think I'm just going to make it a little moment now. I think that we're looking through the files of our lives, aren't we? And our kids are chosen, aren't they?
Yeah.
We get to say that we chose you, and they didn't necessarily have a choice about it and would hate it, and didn't want to be here, but we chose you.
Yeah.
And God chose us.
Yeah.
In that same way, He adopted us into His family. And so that means that we are unique, we are special, we are loved beyond measure.
More than we can understand, and I hope everyone understands that. It's hard. Every time I get a whiff of that, it overwhelms me. I find it very emotional, and I love that about it. Next week it's about Crown Church, about parenting, so we better tune in to find out how.
Who's doing that?
It's obviously not us. It's somebody.
Haven't you done something for
I've got vast experiences of parenting, and all I can tell you is just when you think you know what you're doing, boom, a kid will come along and go, oh yeah, you think you've got this sorted. Tune in next week.
I will. I'm going to be learning.
I think I'm an 80s TV, but tune in next week because we're going to be talking about parenting. This is weird, I do say, however you got your kids, or however you
by
might
hook
get
or by crook.
However, you can't say that about by hook or by crook.
No, totally legal.
No crooks. Whether you're a birth parent, a foster carer, an adopter, or whether you are adopted or if you've been in care, I know we're laughing, but it's the nature of it. God does love you, and I think God wants us to all expand our families and encourage and include everybody, because in the same way, like you said, God chose each one of us. He calls us by name. He knitted us in our mother's wombs.
It's an amazing song.
It's a lovely all right.
Are we done? I think there's another song coming up, isn't there? To finish us out.
That's what we should have said.
And is it how? Oh, I don't know. I've forgotten the name of the song. It'll be brilliant.
It's been
lovely to chat to you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks.
Even if they haven't, I've really enjoyed.
We've enjoyed our time.
Chatting on a simple with you, Claire.
Anytime.
That was brilliant. All right, so we're going to end with a song now. But if you want to keep commenting, please do. Thanks for what you've said. It's been some lovely stuff there and some deep stuff.
Yeah.
I was an orphan lost at the fall, running away when I'd hear you call. Father, you worked your will. I had no righteousness of my own, I had no right to draw near your throne. But Father, you loved me still. And in love before you laid the world's foundation, predestined to adopt me as your own. You have raised me up so high above my station. I'm a child of God by grace and grace alone. Home to seek out the lost. You knew the great and terrible cost, but Jesus, your face was set. I worked my fingers down to the bone, nothing I did could ever atone. And Jesus, you paid my debt. By your blood I have redemption and salvation. Lord, you died that I might reap what you have sown, and you rose that I might be a new creation. I am all of my life. I never knew the day from the night. Spirit, you made me see. I swore I knew the way on my own. A head full of rocks, a heart made of stone. Spirit, you moved in me. At your touch, my sleeping spirit was awakened. On my darkened heart, the light of Christ has shone. Called into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. Yes, I'll stand in faith by grace and grace alone. I will run this race by grace and grace alone. I will reach the end by grace and grace alone. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace